Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Brownsville Matters. We have with us today Tom Gomez, who is a professor of history at BISD and also a local organizer of skateboarding. And he's going to talk to us about a particular event that's going to occur soon that's going to have a special day for skateboarders in Brownsville. But before we get there, we want to talk about some of the interesting experiences Tom has had as a student here in Brownsville. You went to UTBTSC, right?
Yes, I did.
And you have your degree in biology and history.
Yes, sir. I have a Bachelor's of Arts in history and a Bachelor of Science in biology.
So you have this beautiful bridge from what I call the old days to the new days.
Absolutely. When you say that, it makes me think of my undergrad years, and I've tried to explain this to people who weren't at the university. And I said it was, the old university was like the Wild West.
Well, it was, and I have transcended those two worlds. And one of the great differences that I know of is that in the, say, pre-9/11,
yes,
we, as professors, we would often, along with students, we would often go across to have lunch in Matamoros. It's very common. Mm-hmm. We go across and have lunch, or we go there on Friday to happy hour. And this was, as I always say, the river was an informality. We would just flow back and forth with great ease, and it was two cities blended. And then the other thing that you and I were mentioning before we came on the air is we would also make a lot of trips as, faculty and students into Mexico. I guess the most famous one was what I think NOP really started at the Thanksgiving excursion to San Miguel de Allende.
Oh, yeah. That was so cool. Mm-hmm. I only ever got to go once on one of those trips, but I traveled a lot with Dr. Paul and mm-hmm. with the Gorgas Society.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to go one time to San Miguel, and it was just so... and this is San Miguel in the 90s. 1994, 1995. It's a different city now, but so is Brownsville.
Sure. And, the Gorgas Foundation is also one of those magical experiences that very few people get to have today. I don't think anybody gets to have it because they don't take trips into Mexico the way, and they usually do it with a small number of students. You'd go with like 10 or 12, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm actually legacy Gorgas. My aunt, Paula Gomez, who is the director of the Brownsville Community Health Center, she was with Miss Warburton in the mm-hmm. early days, and
yes.
and I'd love to sit around with her and the alumni like Mr. Loft and Genaro Lopez and all the hear their stories because they went when it was they were the ones that built the cabins.
Built it, yeah.
And that was just so cool.
Larry made them all solar.
Oh, did he really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Man, that's so cool.
Yeah, they are completely self-sufficient off the grid and don't need any help. It's great. And they're beautiful inside. They're beautifully crafted. But I wanted to get your memories. Do you remember your first time going to Rancho?
Oh, absolutely. That's what. So, being part of the Gorgas Science Society as a young man, you start off as the student going on the student trips, mm-hmm. and then once you got involved with the club more, we started going on work trips, and that's a whole different kind of trip. It's not the we're gonna go birding or we're gonna go hike up to the strawberry patch or out to the lookout. Now it's, hey, guess what? You're gonna change the oil in the differentials, or hey, you're gonna go clean out the the presa. And I was like, oh, okay, it's just a whole different trip. So I tell my wife, I said, when we were young, we got those first experiences of I got to stay in Cook's cabin. Mm-hmm. And Cook's cabin is overlooking the tombstone of the man who bought the ranch. And, mm-hmm. Certain times of the year, you get the moonlight reflect off of his tombstone mm-hmm. in this cloud forest, that's about the same altitude as Denver. It's just, south, not north. Mm-hmm. So, during the winter, it drops down,
to really cold.
Oh, real cold. And you're up in the mountains, and we were sitting up in the mountains, I can remember sitting on Cook Cabin with another professor of biology, Mauro Reis, and another friend of mine, and we were just looking over and just seeing the eerie glow off of the tombstone, and then hearing the story about how he got murdered, and we were all like, ooh, it was kind of spooky, but But yeah, it was just so much. I mean, Cook's Cabin was immaculate. I mean, you know, we didn't know why it was immaculate until we went on those work trips. Then we figured out why it was immaculate.
One of the things I remember from being up there on a seminar, a small number of people, but we had all the windows open in a cabin. We were meeting in the central meeting room.
In the keep?
In the keep. And we were just sitting there talking, and a cloud blew through the room.
Oh, wow.
So suddenly the people that were 20 feet away were slightly obscured as a cloud actually blew through the room. I tell you, Rancho, when the sun would come out over those wildflowers, it was really the most beautiful place in the world I've ever seen. Just absolutely heavenly.
It really is. You know, my family originally is from Tamaulipas, and my grandfather lived out there. You know, when he was a young man, and we heard stories. So then his daughter, my Aunt Paula, started with the Gorgas, and she started taking trips regularly into, you know, Gomez Farias and you know, Cielito, Rancho, Cielo, the whole area. So by the time I was in my teens, I just kept seeing pictures and hearing stories, and they're like, don't worry. And then, you know, you get to college, and I was like, oh no, that was, you know, my parents' generation. That's not me.
That's not for you, right?
You know, weirdly enough, you have someone who brings you, you know, someone who, you know, kind of gives you that little push. And I was dating a girl, and she said, well, I'm part of Gorgas. And I said, well, you know, I'm not. She says, well, you got to come with me. And I said, I have to? She said, well, okay, fine, I'll go. And before you knew it, she left Gorgas and I stayed. And it was just one of those things. I said, you guys gonna do beach cleanup? I go, I love the beach. Let's go do a beach cleanup.
Let's go do this.
Yeah, they said, we're gonna go plant trees for real reforestation. I was like, I'm in, let's go. I love planting trees. And it just became so much fun that I stayed with Gorgas pretty much all through my college years. And you know, and like you said, in those days, you know, pre 9/11, it was, you know, it was a little bit more lax. We were allowed to travel into Mexico and take those amazing trips. And, you know, by 1997, we had raised enough money to go with Sandesh Kadur, and we went to India. And that's, you know, life-changing experience. You know.
So, well, a natural extension of all that you had done locally. You know, I had learned these trips to San Miguel and Guanajuato from Tony Knopp and Walter Pierce. And so when I left here and went over to Pan Am, they didn't have anything like that going on. So I organized Thanksgiving trips from there to San Miguel. And so sometimes we would have 4 buses of South Texas students in San Miguel at Thanksgiving. And,
that's just so cool.
And I love that the hotels there during Thanksgiving would have Thanksgiving dinner for us to accommodate our own heritage and rituals. It wasn't always perfect, but it was you know, you had to appreciate the effort, you know.
That's awesome.
And then we would go down the street to, I forgot the name of a bar, but, you know, the Cowboys always play on Thanksgiving Day. And so they had this bar down there where they would have a satellite hookup, and you could go down there, and you're in the, you know, when it's your first experience down there, you say, my God, I'm down here in a little village in Mexico, and I can watch the Cowboy game.
Absolutely.
And it would be full. It would be full, like 50 people in there, mostly Texans, of course, watching the Thanksgiving game. So it was wonderful times. And I'm so glad to hear that Rancho del Cielo is intact, because so many of us had worried that during the intervening 20 years with all the nautical problems that place would be destroyed. And so I'm glad to know that it's intact.
Well, we heard through the grapevine that there was some people that were, you know, kind of making incursions into the general area. But the Mexican government intervened, and one of the universities down in Ciudad Mante, from what I understand, I don't know the full details, but you know, I have maintained contact with Dr. Jean Paul over the years, and you know, he had been speaking about taking a trip. And so, you know, when I graduated high school, you know, I would skate and I would surf, which we'll talk more about that later. And I had a lot of friends that would go down to Puerto Escondido and Sayulita and you know, Colima and all those areas to surf. And I didn't feel comfortable traveling with them because they're all from South Texas. And I said, you guys don't even speak Spanish, right? You know, but Dr. Paul was just like, he was Dr. Paul. I said, I'll go with him, you know. And then once we started adventuring a little bit more with Dr. Paul, then I said, yeah, I'm in for a surf trip. Let's go. Now I feel, a little bit more comfortable traveling, and you get, and you still kind of feel that. I think that we're starting to see a resurgence of people going back, traveling in Mexico. And I really hope that trend continues.
Well, my understanding is, and I've done it myself, is that if you just fly across the frontera, if you'll just fly in and don't be driving, you'll be all right. Just fly into Guadalajara, fly into Mexico City, and it's just you don't want to be driving the frontier alone or in this, in any way that's vulnerable. And if you must drive the frontera, then don't do it at night.
Well, that's I like to consider myself the second generation of BISD's surfer skater teachers. We have he just retired this past year, and he began his career when I was graduating high school, and he was a surfer and a skater, and his name's Gaines Burns, and he was an art teacher at Hannah for many years. Well, Mr. Burns and Mr. Reed from Port Isabel ISD, they would get together and do these really cool surf trips down, every year. And those surf trips were the ones that had started way back, and they coincided with those Thanksgiving trips because everybody gets off for Thanksgiving.
That's right. Yes,
and said, you know what? This is some of the best surf during that time. And they had groups that would say, hey, look, you know what? We're all planning on going down here. Y'all can attach yourselves to us, and we'll be in the same general area. Get your own hotel, the whole 9 yards. And they had mentioned the same thing you did. They stopped the driving and they started flying in. Yeah. And to kind of avoid the whole, narco issue.
Puerto Escondido is a wonderful surfing village.
Yeah.
I used to say it's San Miguel on the beach.
Yes, exactly. And they have a lot of people from San Miguel that go there. One of the he's a younger guy now. He's probably in his early 20s. He said that they would see on the weekends is mostly when you see all the people from Guadalajara, and he says he likes to go down there and stay for a month so he can get as much surfing in as possible. And he says we started calling them the Guad Squad.
So how did you make this transition from the surfer world to the skater world?
Well, that kind of one of the things that growing up in South Texas, we at 13 years old. Even probably younger, you're not allowed to go to the beach by yourself. And my father was a beach lifeguard, and he had a rule about us in the water because he had seen people drown, and he had saved so many people from drowning that when I was about 13 years old, and my brother was 9. They probably call it child endangerment these days, but his deal was, if you guys think you can surf, before you get on a board, he says you need to be able to go with me, swim out to the third sandbar and back. And if you can't do that, you have no business on a board. Because if you lose that board, you're going to drown. And me and my brother were terrified of drowning, so we were like, we got to be a good swimmer for Dad, because Dad was a beach lifeguard, and my dad could cut through the water like a dolphin in those days, and I, we would just follow him. So but it's South Texas, so we get hurricane surf, we get those cold front surf, you get that, and so it's not real consistent.
I've always called it the third sandbar, and there's a lot of people call that the second sandbar, and there's some people call it the first sandbar, like they're counting backwards. That's the first one you would encounter if you were a shark moving into the shore. So is that the common term for surfers? They call it the third sandbar?
I've always called it the third.
Me too.
My father, like I said, I learned from the old man. He was, interesting story about that. He, the current, I don't know if he's a commissioner or he's on the council for South Padre Island, and Kerry Schwartz was also a lifeguard with my dad. And, first time I saw him, he's like, what'd you say your name was? I said, Tom Gomez. He goes, I knew a Tom Gomez. He goes, yeah, he said to say hi. He said, yeah. So from there, from the lifeguard's perspective, I guess if you're looking towards the water, that would make it the third. If you're coming in, like you said, like a fish or a boat, that would be the first.
The first one that you'd come across. But no, I mean, most people are describing it from the shore. And so you have that a little bitty one right out, and then you've got another 30, 40 yards. You've got the second one where the waves really kind of break. where you can get, if you're a boogie boarder, you can kind of get some movement out there.
Oh yeah.
And then you got this trough that goes down. It's maybe 12 feet deep out there, maybe in the trough, and then you come up to the third sandbar, which is sometimes very peaceful out there, and sometimes it's very rough.
Yeah. Depending on the days, I mean, just sitting on your board can be rough, and, you know, and you are in deep water, and you have to be confident. I mean, I you know, when you were younger, you're a lot more agile.
Oh yeah,
surfing was a lot easier.
Tell me about it.
Now it's work just getting out there. But you know, you get a wave or two, and you feel great, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to come back in a couple of weeks, and you know.
Now, is the best surfing really by the jetties?
I think so.
Yeah.
There's different guys will tell you different things. When I was a kid, you know, we felt a little bit more comfortable on Boca Chica because there was less of a crowd, and the waves broke a different way as well, you know. So sometimes Boca Chica was going off when South Padre Island was kind of like, you know, choppy or whatever.
But do the jetties themselves create the waves? Is that?
Yes, to a certain extent. It'll peel off of the jetties, or it just depends on where the wave's breaking. The wave kind of comes and it hits the land. We have here what's called a shore break. So as soon as it kind of hits the shore, the wave starts to break. Depending on the time of year, you get different sizes, you know, and of course the tides affect that as well.
Sure.
And, you know, certain times of the month you're bound to get a good swell, and you know, before I would go by Gordon's bait shop back in the early '90s, and I would look for the high tide schedule and be like, oh, high tide's coming in, let's go see if there's a good wave, you know, and now they have all these really cool apps for it, which I barely found out about. You know, I have he's a Brownsville native who lives out in California, and when he comes in, he's like, "You're not on Magic Seaweed?" And I said, "What's Magic Seaweed?" I said, "You kind of giving him the eyeball, like, is this a code word or something?" He says, "No, it's an app." And he says, "Oh, okay." I said, "Oh, what does it tell you?" He says, "Well, it tells you where the waves are." I said, "Really?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "All you got to do is plug in what beach you want to go to, and you look at the app and you plug in the beach, and it says, oh, this beach is at 1 to 2 foot surf, 6 second break. It's going to be breaking between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock." And I said, well, this takes all the guesswork out of it, you know. Before, even before the age of cell phones, I mean, some days you would drive all the way out to the island, pack up your boards, pack up your, all your gear and your water and your stuff, and you get out there and then it's flat. I mean, it looks like Lake Travis.
In the early '90s, I lived on the beach. I rented a house out there, and people used to call me. And they'd say, "What's the surf look like?"
Well, yeah, because in those days, in the early '90s, if I'm not mistaken, On the Beach might have been the ones that had the surf report. But they were kind of hit or miss. Sometimes you'd call the surf report and they say, "Oh yeah, it's great," and then no, it's not. It's not great at all. You know.
And in South Padre, is it the best surfing on the Texas coast? Are there any little pockets that are better?
So I hear a lot, and I haven't personally gone because I just social media has really changed the way things happen, and more so the way people communicate. Right. So, I've been friends with Gaines since, I graduated high school. I mean, he was, a new teacher. He just happened to skate, and he just happened to surf, and we met, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I skate and surf," and I was like, "Yeah, okay, Dad," kind of ignored him a little bit. Then years later, I'm seeing him out, and he's got a ramp, and everybody's like, "Have you been to Gaines' house?" And I'm like, "No." They're like, "He's got an 8-foot ramp," and I said, "Oh, really?" I'm like, "Well, let's go to Gaines' house, I'm in, and just recently he went to a competition in Corpus, and I knew Corpus had good surf, but I never knew where to go, and it's not my town. I don't know the.
Right.
I was more comfortable on South Padre Island in Boca Chica because, we knew about it.
Sure.
And we knew that sometimes it was breaking better in the cove, on a big swell, when South Padre or the Isla Blanca break in front of the pavilion was just too rough. You could go into the cove, and the cove had some nice little small ones that you could just, if you were like me and you weren't trying to go for the 10-foot wave, I'll take that 3-footer right there, sir. Thank you very much. But it was, it was fun, and like I said, the older you get, you kind of look for the smaller stuff, unless of course your gains, and but he went and told me, I don't want to say if it was a month or two ago, he took 2 divisions in the championship for state, and they said that everybody's been going to Bob Hall, to the point now that some people have been complaining that Bob Hall's overcrowded surf break. And I said, well, I still have never been there. I mean, I've seen it.
That's in Corpus?
There. Yeah, in Corpus Christi. And I don't know if there was an issue because of the last hurricane and the pier got destroyed or something like that. But that, like I said, still haven't been back to look at it. I haven't been to Bob Hall Pier probably in 10 years. But from social media and the competition posts and everybody showing the the pictures of I said, wow, man. I go, now I'm interested. I was like, I kind of I don't want to go on a big day where everybody's there, but
sure.
It would be cool to check it out. As far as further up the coast, that's the other one that I've seen.
Well, let's talk about the skateboarding scene here in Brownsville. This is of great interest of yours because you have an organization.
Well, just to clarify, I didn't start the organization.
Okay.
I went to dinner with now my sister-in-law. At the time, she was just a very old friend, and she said, "Hey, you need to come have dinner with us. We have so-and-so's in from out of town, and we're going to go over to the Vermilion and have some nachos." And I said, "Vermilion nachos, I'm there. Let's go." So we sat down, and they introduced me to a man named Raul Valdez, and I had. At some point, I had quit skateboarding. I think I was about 33 years old, which most people are like, "Well, yeah, you were 33," But I had an accident out in South Padre Island at this little bowl that is known as Gwen Bowl, and I just hung up and I snapped my arm, and it had an external fixator, and I swore that I was never getting back on a board. And I'm like, I'm too old for this. I don't know what was going through my mind. It's crazy, right? Well, lo and behold, here we are sitting at dinner, and Corey, my sister-in-law, says, "Well, have you met Raul?" And I said, "No, I don't think so." And he's like, "Hi, I'm Raul Valdez." I'm like, "Yeah." I go, "Yeah, where are you from?" "Port Isabel." I said, "Oh, I got a bunch of cousins in Port Isabel." And he's, "Oh, yeah, so-and-so's your cousin." And we start talking. Turns out that he was in a band with one of my cousins, and I said, "Oh, cool." We started becoming friends, and he keeps kind of picking at me and saying, "Well, I heard you used to skate." And I said, "I did." I go, I've kind of given it up the last 3 or 4 years, and I don't know if I'm going to come back to it." And I said, "I don't think so." And he's like, "Nonsense." He goes, "You're going to just come out and hang out with us." He goes, and he starts mentioning all the names. And I said, "Well, wait a second." I said, who are you with?" And he said, "Oh, no." He says, "We're just a club of guys that hang out." And he says, and he goes, got Clint Roberts and Jesse Rhodes and Frank Serrata, and he starts naming off all these skaters that I knew from my childhood. And I said, "Wow, what happened to that guy? I haven't seen him in 20 years. He says, "Oh, well, he was at the park last Saturday." And I said, "Well, what do you guys?" Because you guys like are you guys just hanging out? And he says, "No, we have a little club." He goes, it's a little skateboard club." He goes, "And we're not, because we don't pressure people, but it's fun to hang out and talk and skate." And I said, "Oh yeah." So he started something called the Refuge Crew, and it was just old friends that knew each other from the 80s and 90s. The what we like to call the golden era of skateboarding, and just, hey, check it out. We're all going to be at the Brownsville Sports Park, or we're all going to be at so-and-so's house.
But in the 80s, there was no Brownsville skate park, was there?
No. So
where did you skate in the 80s?
That's an interesting one all in of itself. So in the early 80s, there was a place in Harlingen called Six Shooter Junction, and we've been toying with the idea of doing a documentary on it. So there was I don't know if anyone remembers Six Shooter Junction or not, but it was kind of like an amusement park / like pizza place. It was just all around, kind of geared towards the kids, right? Well, they had these big like bowls in the back. Well, I was too young for that. When they closed Six Shooter, I would say it was 86 or 87. So I was about 11 or 12, and I was skateboarding, but my mom was not going to pay for a $60 helmet to put on my head. And she was like, no, you got front yard skateboarding. That's it, And in a way that was cool because since that's all we had, we had, going down the driveway on a little what we used to call banana boards. The Veriflex was a company out of California in the late 70s, early 80s, and they were producing these boards. And the predominant color that was sold, at least down here, back when Western Auto was open, and it was yellow. It was a yellow, orange, yellow, red boards with big, soft wheels on them. Well,
so they call it banana board.
Yeah, so it was a banana board. It was a banana board, and we didn't have, at the time, if you were trying to buy a professional skateboard, it was going to run you almost as much as it runs nowadays. And that's 1983. 1982. My mom wasn't going to dish out $150. So the kid could go down the driveway so he can get one of those banana boards. I mean, I always have a story that I laugh about now because if I knew back then what it was worth, I would have kept it. But my grandmother went to a flea market or a garage sale, and somebody's mom just put out one of those old banana boards, and she paid about $8 for it, and she's like, and this is for my grandson, and the rest is history. But I kept seeing all the cool kids with these amazing state-of-the-art boards that did these killer turns, and here I was with an $8 skateboard my grandma got at a garage sale, and I was like, I'm not gonna go with that. I'm gonna go skate the driveway, So I never really got to do the 6-shooter junction, but a lot of the guys who were a year or two older than me, Jason Fry and the Fry brothers, Frank Serrata, Jesse and a few other people, they actually got to do the 6-shooter junction, and there's some video of it somewhere. And it's really cool because that's kind of a time capsule of what that early era of skateboarding was down here.
Sure.
We had a pro skater here in Brownsville who some people know, some people don't, Mark Gauser, who goes by, his nickname's Gumby. And he was on tour with Tony Hawk and Matt Hensley back in the 80s. He was a pro skater, but just like any professional sport, one injury, that's the end.
That's it.
And you're done. And especially, your 20s go by lightning fast. So he had a bad break or something, and that ended his career.
I always see them do these incredible acrobatics, and I'm always saying, how do you learn to do that without getting killed? To the point that you can still do it. How do you learn that trick? Because it's so complicated and so dangerous. How do you get to the point where you can actually do it?
A lot of practice.
Yeah. But you're going to fall a lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so you got to fall with luck, or you'll have a broken wrist, broken leg.
It's its own.
It's its own art form, falling well, right?
Yes, absolutely. Some people fall better than others. Mm-hmm. I have one friend who I don't think I have ever seen him wear a set of pads ever, and he does some of the craziest things of anybody. And we're both pushing 50 now, and we're not exactly the spring chickens that we used to be, and he still goes for it. And I'm like, wow, man, it's like you're still impressing me at this age,
Well, I guess when I saw in the Olympics, and that's another great thing that skating has reached the point of that international respectability of an Olympic event. But I was watching it in the recent Olympics, and I watched Tony Hawk go, I don't know what you call it, but it was above the line by 9 feet.
Oh yeah.
It was like the highest anybody had ever gone. What do you call it? It's above the
coping. Yeah.
And he was way up there, and I guess the only helpful thing is when they fail, they're failing on a curve.
Yes.
So they're coming down. They're not hitting flat. They slide it down, and so it's not so terrible.
Well,
it's still bad, but
oh yeah, well, it depends. I can remember 2000. I would say it was 2008, and I was watching the X Games, and one of my favorite skateboarders is Danny Way, and he had just jumped the wall of China, with a skateboard. He's one of the only skateboarders whose name is engraved on the wall of China because he jumped it with a skateboard. But he hung up, and he was coming in off of a 25-foot or something air, and he hit the ramp at such a speed so later on, I'm taking physics, and you know, I was sitting there with this physics teacher from the university, and I said, man, I was telling him all about it. I go, can you imagine the force? He goes, why are we imagining?
Let's work it out.
Yeah. So he starts doing the math with me, and I said, you know, he goes, well, this was the height. He goes, how much do you think he weighs? I'm like, you know, roughly 180, you know. When we start doing, he goes, okay. He goes, basically what happened to your friend? I said, well, he's not my friend. He's a professional skateboarder. He goes, oh, yeah, okay. Well, you know what happened? He said, no. He goes, it's like a wall ran at him at about 30 miles an hour. And I said, oh, okay, you know. But I mean, he got up and he won. And then I guess part of it is that ability to know that, you know, you're gonna take those falls, and you got to know how to fall with it, and then getting up and continuing. At 33, I really thought after that last fall I was done.
I can do it. Yeah.
I was like, this is, you know, all the surgeries and everything later. I said, this is crazy. Why am I still even doing this? And yet here I am.
There you are. Are you better now than you were? I mean, more talented, able to do more.
I am more experienced.
More experience, yeah. Okay.
Right. I at that age, I think I was a lot more limber, and I took for granted what I could do, and I didn't push my limits as much, because it didn't seem like I had any limits, so I could just do whatever I wanted, right?
So now your club that you're president of?
Yes.
Your club has the old guard and the new guard. You have students from BISD that are part of this? Well,
so Raul and Jimmy San Miguel and a few others had started the Refuge crew, and that was, you know, just this little group that was skating together and hanging out and you know, getting together on weekends. Well, out of that, we had like something occur like Hurricane Harvey, so we decided to start putting on these, you know, kind of competition / jam session or whatever, and we'd get some local musicians to play and have all the kids jump in the bowl and give away skateboards and wheels and all kinds of stuff like that. And at the same time, we're like, oh, to enter the competition, bring water or bring, you know, canned goods, because we're going to send, you know, some stuff up to the victims of Hurricane Harvey. And I don't remember exactly what year that was, but we ended up getting 2 truckloads. And in conjunction, since the skate park is so close to the Toyota dealership, the guys at the Toyota dealership said, you guys don't even have to go that far. Because whatever they bring to the skate park, load it in your trucks, come drop it off, and Toyota will make sure that it gets to, you know, to Houston. And I said, okay, we're in. And we collected a bunch of stuff for hurricane relief, and we took 2 truckloads of water, canned goods, clothes, toilet paper, paper towels, everything. And that kind of started it for me. Well, during the pandemic, there is a professional skateboarder from the 80s by the name of Jesse Martinez, and he had skated for several companies, and he has been the curator, you would say, of the Venice skate park, and he was instrumental in getting it built. And, you know, by that time, social media, like I said, is just this, you know, earth-changing force almost, you know, and here I have the ability to reach out to Jesse Martinez. And I was like, you know, I only remember seeing him on Bones Brigade videos when I was a little kid, you know, and next thing you know, he's like, hey, send me your number. And I sent him my number. And then, you know, I told him about the club, and I told him about what we've been doing. And he goes, I have an idea. And I said, okay. And he goes, I'm letting a few people in on it. I like what you guys are doing in South Texas. I'm going to let you guys in on it. I said, okay. Well, you know, the pandemic was crazy for everybody. And as it turns out, there was another person in the mix, a guy named Rodney Garcia. He was out of San Antonio, and he was also communicating fairly regular with Jesse. So Rodney became the Texas president for the club. Between me and Rodney, we got the club together here in this side of Texas, from San Antonio, all the Corpus Christi bend, down to South Texas. And Rodney kind of took care of East Texas to North Texas. And we had another friend who was out in El Paso. But since El Paso, it's like almost in a different state. I mean, it's just so far away. It was easier for me and him to collaborate. Unfortunately, later that year, we lost Rodney to a heart attack. But somebody stepped in and took his place. We had Sean Haynes out of Austin. And he was, he's also, we're all about the same age. We're all in our mid to late 40s and early 50s, and we were all skateboarders in the 80s, and it's a way to stay healthy and continue to keep active with something that you find fun. It's not a drag to get up and go skateboarding like it is a drag to get up and go to the gym. I mean, I know I have to go to the gym, but I don't always want to go to the gym.
Yeah, but you always want to go skate.
But I always want to go skate. So if you call me at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday and say, hey, we're all going to be over here at the sports park, or we're going to be over here at Oliveta Park, or we're going to go skate this ditch, and I'm like, oh man, I'm there, let's go. I'll just pack up my board and some waters and be on our way.
So now you have in Brownsville, as compared to the 90s and 80s, you have venues that are much more attractive and appealing to skaters?
Well, after I would like to call it the death of six shooter. After the death of six shooter, we had between 1986 and about 1990, 1991, there was the era of the backyard ramps, and everybody was building them. I mean, I had a little quarter pipe that we had built from borrowed and discarded parts, and put it on the driveway or on the street in front of your house. A lot of us couldn't afford a full half pipe, or let alone something that was 6 or 12 feet high. So we started. I'd like to say that we were the transitional era. There was the big ramp, the big bowl era of the early 80s. And then right about 86 to like 91, that started kind of going away. And you had this new breed of skater with nowhere to go. And, some of us on different side of towns had different spots. And we didn't know. I mean, I met Gabriel, at the courthouse. Courthouse was one of those places.
One of those places where?
Yeah, because it had steps. And then now every skate park has incorporated that piece of street skateboarding into the landscape of the skate park, because for those years there was no skate park. Right. So a lot of the skaters, the skating itself as an art form kind of grew and said, okay, well now we're not going to do ramps, we're going to just ride off the steps as fast as we can and see how far we can get. Yeah.
Los Fresnos has a pretty good skate park. At least it's very busy.
Oh yeah. Well, that was one of the first ones that was built. I think, and I was, so that was 2008, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I had just recently returned to South Texas. I had been living in Austin and then San Antonio and Florida and other places, and I when I came home, somebody told me, hey, we have a skate park. And I said, what? They said, yeah, we got a skate park. And I'm like, well, I go, okay. I go, I'll go by, I'll check it out. The initial one that was built, there was a group of skaters on South Padre Island that were called South Padre Island Team Sports or something like that. I think the acronym was like SPITS or something like that. But they had heard about this bowl, Gwen Bowl. They built that because a young lady got hit by a car in Laguna Vista. She was out on her board and she was just riding in the street, and car didn't see her. So they named the bowl after her, and on the inlay of the tile, they put her name Gwen on there, and that was Raul Valdez was part of that. Mr. Reed from the Port Isabel ISD, and a guy named Eric Bratton, who's no longer here. He's in that was in Port Isabel, though. Yeah, that was in Port Isabel. So that was the first one, and as I understand it, there was somebody on the commission whose son was an avid skater. So when they built the Brownsville Sports Park, he kind of got a little extra push from that new generation of skaters. Those kids are probably in their late 20s, early 30s now, and they were like, "Hey, Dad, we got all these kids who, we'd really like a skate park, and if your dad's a commissioner and he has enough, to bend somebody's ear and say, hey, you know what, this would be something good for the kids." And I am over the moon that he did that, because as you know, now I travel across Texas, pretty regular. When I hear there's a skate park being built, or when I hear there's an event that I want to go check out or just represent the club and take some of our skaters to compete, whatever. And we have the best one south of San Antonio. Like nobody,
well, that's nice. I'm glad to hear it.
Not Corpus. I mean, ours is just beautiful, and it's, I understand they spent a lot of money on it, but it really is the best park. And when other skaters see video, they're like, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in Brownsville, Texas." They're like, "You have that in Brownsville, Texas?" I said, "Yes, we do. It's a great park."
Well, that's wonderful to hear. It's wonderful to hear that, because we don't have a great deal where people from San Antonio can be envious of us.
Oh, yeah.
So that's nice to know.
Yeah. So at the time, and that was a different group of skaters. There was another group of skaters those are in their early to mid 50s now. They brought a bunch of pro skaters from Houston and San Antonio to inaugurate the bowl, and I didn't find out until a day later. I was kind of bummed about that, but they brought a bunch of pros, and they had some really good stuff. And I guess over the years, people get busy, and one group replaces the next group and replaces the next group, and hey, as long as they're continuing, keeping the interest, kind of like the leagues in baseball around here.
Sure. Well, tell me about Skater Day.
So I want to make sure because I had to remember and take notes on this. This was something that was developed by the International Association of Skateboard Companies. So they had done this in, it's like early 2000s, I think 2003 or 2004. And it was just it started in New York and LA and Chicago, these major cities saying, oh, you know what? All these skateboard companies said we're going to have an event. So, of course, East and West had to be the first two. They did an event in New York City where they bombed Broadway, and Broadway has got a slope to it. So all you have like a ton of skaters just going down the street. First year, of course, that caused problems. The city got involved. Why you have all these kids? They're in the middle of the street. They're messing up traffic. Over the years, they figured out how to make it, work into the city, because it became a very big event. Skaters came from all over the world to go do this, in New York City. Same thing in LA. LA had, hey, check it out. We're going to do this on the side of this building. And next thing you know, it's just the side of a building, and there's a ton of skaters there doing all this stuff. Well, the idea spread. The first year, I think it was only 3 cities or 2 cities, something like that. Now it's in over 350 countries.
My.
Yeah, it's
my goodness.
all across the world. Australia, Ireland, Italy, Mexico. It just grew. So,
so what's the date that we're going to have this?
Every year it is, I want to say it's the 29th, if I'm not mistaken. It's June, I think it's June 29th. Is
June 29th,
yeah.
Okay.
And in years past, we really, as a club, didn't pay attention to that particular day. We just did these events just, for our benefit.
Sure.
We want to have a good time. It's somebody's birthday. Hey, here's Raul's birthday. We're gonna have the Raul birthday celebration.
That's nice.
And then when this event came up, the kids had been asking about it. They were saying, the younger generation. We call them the kids. The kids said, hey, are you guys gonna do anything for Go Skate Day? And I'm like, the old response was like, Go Skate Days every day, man. But they were right. We weren't, as a city, we weren't really doing anything. So a couple of times people reached out, and the first one actually, it was 3 years ago. And by that time, I had just started with Jesse, and Jesse had said, you know what? If you have enough people down in South Texas, because it would be cool if you could start a chapter. And so that's how we started with the 100% Skateboarder. And right away, I reached out to Raul and Tito and Jimmy San Miguel, and I said, hey, are you guys in? And they said, yeah, man, that sounds like a great idea. It's cool that you brought the club, to be associated with Jesse and the original skateboarders from Dogtown. And I'm like, yeah. They said, we're in. Okay, cool. So that first year, because of the pandemic, a lot of people really, they said, that was the year right before, that was 2019. The year right before the pandemic, I had 2 gentlemen reach out to me. One of them was he was a skater, but by trade he dealt in used clothes, And he said, hey, how about we do this at Olivera Park? And what if me and a bunch of these, clothiers put up stands? And he goes, you guys can help us with the prize money and running the competition. And I said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So they had these vendors show up, and each one was I don't know, hygiene products, all kinds of things they were selling, beads, jewelry, used clothes, whatever. And at the time, I don't know if he had spoken to him prior to. My cousin is Captain Gabriel Garza from the firefighters. And as kids, he's a few years younger than me. When I came back to South Texas, he was just out of high school, and he was still a skater himself. So I kind of got that generation, and now those kids are in their 40s, right?
Those kids,
those kids in their early 40s. His generation was like, hey, well, let's go skate. So, while a lot of my friends were starting families and these guys were just out of high school, they still had that drive to go do it. And they were like, I was like, yeah, I'll go skate with you guys, absolutely. So over the years, now he's got kids in junior high, and I've got kids in junior high, and he's like, they're taking, I wouldn't say the same level of interest, but they've taken an interest in skateboarding. So
Good.
We said, hey, let's take the kids skating. And then he's like, hey, well, let's me and you skate. I said, yeah, let's go skate, without the kids. All right, we'll go without the kids, And they had found out, or he had been asking around about the same thing. He'd been asking around, so what's Brownsville doing for Go Skate Day? And I said, I don't know. I said, well, maybe we should do something. And he says, and he started offering me ideas. Well, somehow we both got in touch with the same people, and he said, this is what the firefighters want to do. And I'm a union man. I started with the Port of Brownsville in 1993 as a longshoreman. My father was a longshoreman, and my grandfather was a longshoreman. My uncle was a longshoreman, so it's kind of a family tradition. And I went to go work out there, and I joined the ILA, Local 1588. I was in 1544. Sorry, and when I joined the BISD, I started with teachers union, and my cousin's with the firefighters union, and he's, we're union men. We do stuff for each other and for the community. I said, okay, yeah. So he says, well, I'm going to bring the firefighters union. And I said, that's awesome. And he says, okay. So he brings the firefighters union. They supply, I don't know what the first year, I don't have no idea how much they spent, but they brought enough hot dogs for everybody. And they set up their grill, and they got some water, and they said, what do you guys have prepared? I said, well, I've got this tent. I really didn't have a whole lot,
So you didn't bring the longshoremen?
Oh, no. Those guys are all, the guys I worked with by now are retired. But, and the teachers really, they have, it's their vacation. I wasn't even going to bother the teachers. But he had told me, he goes, there was, I think, 3 or 4 people within his firefighter house who were actually old skaters themselves.
How interesting.
Yeah, so they were, as soon as they found out that Captain Garza was involved, they're like, oh, we'll follow Captain Garza.
There, sure.
Yeah. So the first year he supplied us with hot dogs and water, and then the vendors brought us, a bunch of other stuff, and that's how it started. And I think some of the vendors put up prize money that equaled to the first year, it was about $150, and then our sister chapter in Austin sent us a few skateboards and wheels and stuff to give away.
Sure.
Yeah, and it started small.
So what are you going to do this year?
Oh man! So last year was the biggest event we've done so far, and that one we did 2 events, and that one, so the Brownsville event started, and again, word of mouth and social media.
So do you have a website for your group?
Yes, we have
a Facebook page or something.
Yeah, we have the 100% skateboarder page, and Raul runs the page, and he
is that what it's called? 100%,
yes,
100%er.
Yeah, it's 100% skateboarder. So the club itself is named after a pro skater from the 80s, 70s and 80s named Jay Adams. And he had a tattoo on his chest that said 100% skateboarder.
Okay.
And that was, and he was an old surfer.
So I go on Facebook and I search 100%er, and I'll come to your group.
Yeah, it'll say 100% skateboarder, and you'll see the picture of our patch and everything in there.
So if I friend that page, then I can keep up with everything that you're up to.
Oh yeah, Raul posts about it all the time.
All the things that you're going to have coming up that I can be a part of.
Absolutely, and we try to stay in touch with the Coastal Bend, and we try to stay in touch with Austin and with San Antonio. So out of that, the chapter started growing. I can't tell you the stuff that the Austin chapter and the San Antonio, because they've gone big. I mean, bigger city, more funds.
Of course.
They've gone real big.
How many do you have in your group?
Right now, our core group is about 5 or 6 people. But as far as people who have helped out, we have had such a support from the community. So this past year, the police union president, J.J. Trevino, he found out, and he said, hey, I see the firefighters did this. What can the police do for you? And I said, man, whatever you guys want to do. So they decided in the morning. So now we have 2 large groups that are helping out. And
but you don't just. You said you have a core group of 5 people. You don't have just 5 people show up on this day. You've got a lot of people from the skateboarder community.
Yes.
How many did you have attend the Skater Day?
So Go Skate Day got broken up into 2 major events here in Cameron County.
Okay.
They wanted us to help with an event in Hidalgo, but I can only be in so many places.
Sure.
And then so the morning we did Olivera Park, and we probably had a turnout of over 200, maybe 300 people.
Oh, that's great. That's excellent.
Now, they are not all at one time.
I understand.
Throughout the day.
You don't want them all at once.
No,
you can't handle all that.
So many. I mean, it's so much. But in the morning, we had the firefighters provided breakfast, and they did the wake and skate, and they were there by 6 a.m. setting up their grills, and they made breakfast tacos for everybody, and it was great. So they had like coffee, breakfast tacos, and soft drinks and waters, and that was great. And they so then I guess it was a little bit after 10 a.m. the police department shows up, and they do the lunch. So they start providing hot dogs, hamburgers, whatever, and drinks, and then the firefighters were first shift. Well, the newest group of skaters that has come, and these guys literally were in high school 2 and 3 years ago. I mean, they haven't been out of high school that long. They somehow raised close to $3,000, and they threw the biggest event on South Padre Island since the early 90s.
Wow, that's impressive.
I was impressed with them. They reached out to the club.
They probably did it through GoFundMe.
I think from what I understood, and I don't have the full details, because I didn't even find out until, because since we have a little bit more experience running the competitions and running these events, they asked for our help, and I said, sure, whatever I can do, but you guys understand that Brownsville's my focus. And they said, no, we get it, Brownsville's your thing. But you guys are the old school, and we'd love to see you guys represented, with this new. And I said, okay. I go, so you know what? You have me. I said, I don't know if anybody else can make it, because they're going to be tired from all the stuff we did in Brownsville, but I'll make it out there. And I was impressed with these kids. They did South Padre Island had a long history with skateboarding, going back to the early 80s. And then all of a sudden, the city pulled down the ramps, and when they pulled down the ramps, then the kids were out in the streets again. And,
why did they do that?
As I understand it, there was an accident. So the police department had a ramp outside, outside
the police department, right? I remember seeing it. Yes.
Yeah. So that was there for most of the 90s. I think that ramp got torn down in 91 or 92. And that's kind of why we call that the end of the ramp era. And we had Tony Hawk, we had Lance Mountain, all these, big names come down and skate that ramp. And we had like sponsors like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, and, all of a sudden that just ended, and then that, I remember piling into people's trucks and, hey, we got to get to the island, man, because that's where all the action's happening.
So it's probably a legal liability problem.
Somebody got hurt, and I think it was, so in and of itself, it's already, a tough sport. You can get hurt, and then any little thing on a ramp, especially a metal ramp on a hot day, hey, you're going to slide out, and somebody broke a leg, and then mom said something to the city, and then the city's liable, and then, and that kind of put a kibosh on all of that, and that was the end of it. So,
well, an interesting element here is that it used to be that skaters were seen as kind of juvenile delinquents, that they were, and the police were chasing them, and now the police are sponsoring them. So that I like that legitimacy that they've gotten.
That is the biggest change that we've seen, and that's really been the great thing is that now we have people like Trevino and Captain Garza who are coming saying, you know what, we don't want the kids to be marginalized and say, you're out in the streets, you're going to be in trouble. Now you have a place to go.
True.
So we've done our best to keep supporting that and keep supporting the skate parks and cleaning up the parks and throwing these events so that people see, well, we got kids that are honor students doing this. These kids that are going to go to college, that are going to go, be doctors and lawyers.
Yeah.
Those are the people who do the sport. It's not just the juvenile that might end up doing something he's not supposed to.
Well, I can tell you're an historian. You gave us the beautiful history of skateboarding in the Valley, and I'm glad that things are going well, and I appreciate your organization and all that you're doing. Thanks for coming in, Tom. Very good to meet you.
Dr. Strong.
Thanks for watching this BSPA video. Go ahead and hit like and subscribe if you like what you see. And if you really like what you see, go ahead and go to our website, brosoperformingarts.org, and smash the donate button. And then we'll really like you too.